Hello, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk about all things wellbeing in recruitment. But before we dive into things, could you give us a little bit of an idea of who you are and what you do?
Sure. My name is Abbie. I'm the founder of a business called 68 People. We are a recruitment consultancy and training company. I set it up around 5 years ago. And yeah, wellbeing in recruitment feels pretty close to my heart. We talk to a lot of candidates who are struggling. So yeah, it feels like a topic, a worthwhile topic.
So, well-being can be seen as a bit of a buzzword. I guess, in terms of recruitment, what does it really mean and why is it important?
I think when certainly a lot of candidates that we come across, there's, if you are looking for a job, there's probably something that's gone wrong. Not necessarily, but obviously we approach people who aren't job hunting, but a lot of people who are job hunting, something's not quite right at work anyway, or they've been through a redundancy, letting go. There's a lot of letting goes in hospitality still, isn't there? And so they're in a pretty challenging place anyway. And so then to go through a process where you feel as though you're not being heard or seen or listened to, is really difficult. And I think it can really, I've seen it really affect people's mental health, the process that they're going through, and it can take months. Probably the more senior the position, the longer it can take as well. So it's not, it's not solely about kind of junior people finding roles. It's right up to director level. There's a real wellbeing challenge for people who are job hunting for sure. So I think wellbeing in recruitment is important because it's the first impression. The recruitment process is the first impression for any employer, and I think employers can have a tendency to forget that. We're pretty good at people being on a radar from when they start with you, and we're pretty good at inductions and welcome packs and contracts and letters, but actually that process beforehand can be overlooked, and it's probably a decent process for the person that gets the job, but actually the people who don't get the job, whatever stage they've dropped out of the process, that can be really difficult, and it can be compounded by the fact that they've done multiple processes, had multiple rejections, and I'm convinced that our recruitment process as a sector can put people off the sector completely. It's I don't think it's in a great place. I think there's a lot. Well, I should speak more positively. There's a lot to be done.
Okay, I like that. There's lots of opportunity.
The bar is low for anyone looking to make improvements.
Excellent. So I guess the hospitality industry, as you said, can be known for fast turnover rates. Do you think traditional recruitment methods tend to overlook the candidate's well-being?
Yeah, certainly. And I suppose you would made a presumption that with all the tech that we've got around recruitment, that would have been made significantly better. But I think along with the tech, the expectation is higher as well. People want more personalisation, and that is pretty much impossible. We hear a lot about people not going. I suppose we can only speak from a manager perspective. We recruit managers, and we listen to employers who are recruiting kind of hourly paid people. But it is impossible for everybody to hear back personally and get feedback about why they've not gone through. But the expectation is that you should. And so I think there's a disconnect there of I should get a personalised response as to why I'm not right for this role, but actually that's completely impossible. And I think the traditional process is lengthy in many instances. I think, we're still looking at, even at entry level, kind of 2 stages, we're looking at really shonky trial shifts. And there's so much variation in experience, even within great employers. It's quite difficult to control what experience that person has, because they're dealing with not only lots of different sites where they're, for example, trial shifting, but they're dealing with multiple managers within that site. And unless you've got a really, I suppose, great culture where people are appreciated from before they're even employed, then it's really difficult to manage that experience. And it's also not measured. So actually many companies are giving themselves a pat on the back about how great an employer they are, but overlooking these people that have gone through a recruitment process and had a pretty intimate experience of them, but it's not been good, and we don't ask them at all what their experience was like. So it kind of feels like we don't know as well what's happening. So yeah, I think there's a lot of lengthy processes that could be a lot shorter and certainly could be a lot better. We're a hospitality, industry, right? And we talk so much about customer experience, but it feels as though that employee experience or pre-employment experience can be overlooked.
Yeah, for sure. And, I imagine it's difficult to do because everyone's busy, you've got lots of candidates.
Exactly. It's so, the nature of the role for managers it's so hectic. So juggling so many balls to even start to consider that people at the very kind of seedling of a process is difficult. And when I've seen people do it really well, they've not necessarily held responsibility for it themselves. They've opened it up to the team, to supervisors or somebody who is taking ownership of it, and that's when I've seen it work really well. When it's not held by the manager, that it's kind of everybody's responsibility.
Yeah, and I guess it's the reputation of your brand as well. You've got hospitality industry, it's a small industry, people move around a lot. If someone has one bad experience, you've got that word of mouth, and then that could potentially have a bit of a knock-on effect for future candidates.
Totally, yeah. And we come across people that we're talking to about employers, and they'll say, no, I don't want to work for them.
Yeah.
And you kind of delve into why, and often it can be because they've had a recruitment experience that is really poor, and it's very difficult to come back from that. But like I said, I think it's unknown as well. There are so many people teams working so hard who would be mortified by some of the processes that are happening at site level. But in addition to that, we are the process tends to be a bit unstructured in many instances. So that feedback loop, which should exist, especially from manager level upwards, doesn't exist. Or there's so many moving parts and so many decision makers in a recruitment process, whether it's the ops team, people team, all kind of trying to work together. And God, I know it's difficult, but that delay in waiting for feedback, or the number of occasions that we hear that people have had an interview, a management interview or a senior interview, and never heard back, is like, what?
It's
how does that happen? And that,
yeah.
You can imagine then how much that affects somebody, because that is if I went through that, there's no way that wouldn't affect my mental health. No way.
Yeah.
You'd presume it was you. And it's actually not. It's just forgetfulness. It's human error.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. So I guess, is it, that feedback loop, that's kind of like when you're looking at kind of your measuring success for your recruitment process, is that key? Would you say that is something that people need to be doing with candidates? I guess kind of if they're coming in, they've had an interview, and through that process of them maybe not getting the job, that there should be some sort of outreach.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is role dependent. There are some instances where automation is appropriate and can work really well. I think it depends how much. To me, it's about how much time that person has given and how much effort they've made. Should kind of. Sorry, I'll say that again. For me, it's about how much effort that person has taken, which should really correlate with the quality of the feedback that they get, and putting into a process metrics such as somebody will get feedback within 48 hours of an interview or 7 days of an interview, and having the tech to be able to back that up, I think is really important, because it's this ghosting where that really is affecting well-being in a recruitment process. That's probably the worst culprit of well-being in recruitment, is the ghosting.
And I really like that, because when you say that out loud, it's not something that I've ever thought about, but it seems like a common sense approach. If someone's going to give you the time, then the decent thing to do is to reflect that back.
And it's heartbreaking. You see people, calling their families the night before, running, practicing questions with their mum and taking notes, and then to go, the nerves of going for an interview and then not hearing back, you kind of raise your expectations. The other challenge that I think we have is that some interviewers are really overly positive in an interview, and so you actually think it's gone really well.
Yes.
Because look, there's loads of yellow energy in hospitality, and we're really nice,
Yeah.
friendly beings, aren't we? So you come out of an interview thinking, yeah, it's gone well, and then to not hear back, you kind of think you're going mad.
Yeah.
You're like, I thought it went really well, you know. And they mentioned second stage, or they mentioned another stage, and then to hear nothing. But again, it's nobody is trying to make somebody feel like that. It is human error, and it's everybody just being so busy and not probably having great processes or great tech in place.
So just to pick up on the last bit where you were saying about being overly positive in an interview. So if, let's say, I was interviewing a potential candidate and I kind of just had a feeling that it wasn't going to work out, they weren't the right person for the job, what would you say is the best way to handle that situation? So to not kind of give that person kind of the thoughts that maybe this is actually going well.
I think one differentiator for us when we feel like it's gone well or not is if people start selling the company.
Okay.
So if people go down the route of we're amazing, these are our benefits, then the candidate is making a presumption that it's gone well. So that to me is an indicator of I'm just not going to sell the company. I think you're opening a can of worms if you start giving feedback in an interview within the interview setting. That's personal opinion, but I think you probably haven't met everybody that you've got to meet. You need time to evaluate and reflect. So I don't think that people should be given feedback in an interview, but I think that you could give somebody a vibe of that look, we've got other people to meet. It was really enjoyable to meet you. Thank you for your time. We'll come back to you within X number of days. And I think then you're not raising people's expectations to kind of dash their hopes.
So how have you made wellbeing a focus at 68 People, and how do you make sure kind of candidates that you're working with, I guess, feel valued during the recruitment process?
I think it starts with our own company culture and our values and we talk all the time about how how we should behave, what's important, how we achieve our purpose. So it starts with our own culture and people feeling connected to a purpose. Our vision is that we want to change the way the world views recruitment, and we can't do that by being shit. We don't always get it right. There's been instances where I have had a message to say, look, somebody didn't come back to me, and I'm absolutely mortified. And the person who hasn't gone back to them is absolutely mortified. And I think it's how we respond to that, which is an indicator of how much we care. We measure NPS, candidate NPS, at multiple points in our journey. Look, we do use automation. We can't speak to everybody. We get thousands of applications and we can't speak to everybody. So we, at the very minimum, offer an automated response. And once we get in a discussion with somebody, then it really feels as though it has to be about them. I think the world has changed. When I started in recruitment, it was about whether a candidate was right for a job. And now I feel as though that's flipped to whether the job is right for the candidate. We kind of become obsessed with retention, and around 90% of our candidates are still enrolled 12 months later, and that becomes quite an obsessive measure to, okay, if we place you and that doesn't work out, you're affecting that metric, and we really like that metric. So that's important to us, about understanding what motivates somebody. I think honesty is really key. If somebody is looking for progression and development, and the job that we have is a one-site operator with no openings planned, that's not the right fit. Or if they love the idea of brand standards and loads of investment in L&D, but again, it's a smaller business. We've got to get that fit right. So we've got to really understand what somebody's personal motivators are and be honest about whether that company can offer it. For example, like there's a lot of resilience involved in either the pub or late night bar scene. And if somebody is talking about what time they get home from work and they're, they've got challenges themselves around what time in the morning they want to finish, then sending them off to a late night bar interview isn't the right thing to do. So we've got to make sure that all those things are matched. So honesty along the process, I think, is really linked to well-being. and just doing our best to make sure we've got a new ATS, for example, making sure that we're using that to the best, to its full capacity. I think people get a lot of this tech and maybe use 20 or 30% of it, but actually these systems are brilliant at reminders about, we have areas where we can write notes about, I don't know, what someone's dog's called or what they've got coming up when they're birth. We can add those small touches in to make the journey like a customer journey.
Yeah.
And I think people using their tech to its full capacity will directly link to well-being as well. And yeah, I think in the main is just we've got to have a team of people that give a shit.
Yeah. So is that when you are then recruiting for like your team members and you're training your team members? Is that kind of front and center of what?
Yeah. I don't believe that we can, as an agency, find people great places to work or talk about great places to work unless we're a great place to work.
Right.
One indicator of that is not the ultimate one, but we recently added it into the looking to be part of the Sunday Times Best Places to Work.
Wow, excellent.
So we were really proud of that, and yeah, Charlotte and I are really passionate about making sure that it's a great place to work, and then that justifies us finding other people great places to work. So, and hopefully then we can, engage, recruit, and train people who genuinely care about recruitment. I mean, you say the word recruitment, it sounds pretty boring, right? But to me, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah. No, but I love that because it's just really authentic then, and it's you're practicing what you preach as well. Because I think without doing that, people will see the holes and the flaws pretty quickly if it's not authentic.
Yeah, definitely. And we don't want a high turnover of consultants. We want. In terms of measuring, we'd love candidates to, make us their first point of call, and we can only do that if we've done a good job last time. So, and we can only do that if we've got that consistency of consultant where they've got a relationship with somebody, so they can pick up the phone. And we can be there. We do feel. I hear so many conversations in the business that is slightly agony, maybe too many, slightly agony-esque, and we're like kind of coaching people through challenging situations, or once they've got into a role and it's not quite right, just we know we can influence, and that's a really cool part of the job.
From like an employer's perspective, what can they do to create a more welcoming and supportive recruitment environment, and are there any kind of standout examples?
I think what's lovely about recruitment process at site level is that it can be, I don't think it has to be completely dictated by head office. I think that there can be some exciting conversations that happen in team meetings about, right, what are we going to do? How are we going to welcome people when they come for an interview? What does that look like? What are our interviews going to look like? How are we going to, we're going to give them, some of our clients, for example, give people a voucher to come back in, or, I was watching something recently where a guy had gone for an interview, and as soon as he walked in, the team behind the counter, it was a coffee place, had said, "Hi, is it Tom? You're here for an interview?" And they knew his name. The team were really well briefed on his arrival, and instantly you can just imagine that guy was like, "Wow, I want to work here." So I think those kind of little micro touches about your recruitment process is a really good starting point. I think on a more senior level, look, people are they want job descriptions. They want us to know a process. They want to know who's interviewing them. Our best processes, we know them from the start. We know who's doing the first interview. We know who's doing the second interview. We know the timescale. We know how many people they might want to meet versus offer. We know the roles and responsibilities of the role. We know the salary bracket. We know the maximum salary. So I suppose going into recruitment, knowing exactly what you're looking for and being able to communicate that. But then again, it's about whatever level, it's about those little touches, having an offer letter within 24 hours, making sure feedback is delivered within probably 3 to 4 days maximum. Dropping somebody a text message to say good luck. All those tiny little things add up to this is a good employer. And I suppose at a more senior level, one of those, a great metric would be how many people accept your offer. And I don't know how many people measure that. We're an agency, but But that would be a good measure of a recruitment process for sure.
Excellent. I was reading a book recently, and it's like the power of kind of moments. And one of the examples they said was quite often people's first day at a new job is overlooked. And if I just compare it to like an office job, just because that's what I do, and you go in and IT haven't given you your login code, or you've got no laptops, you need to go down and find it yourself.
Yeah, you feel like a pain in the arse,
and
don't
you just
immediately?
think, and it's fine, we all do it, we can, you get on with it. But actually, if you flip it and you think, imagine someone came down and met you at the door and brought you up and said, here's your phone, here's your laptop, here's your login code, and I'll bring you around and introduce you to everyone. And it's just that kind of giving people that opportunity to enjoy that moment versus it being really difficult and kind of feeling like you're pushing against it.
And it's free. Like, there's no, that people do these nice flashy induction packs and starter packs and all that, but actually, the stuff that we're talking about, introducing people, remembering, to have a login code, or remembering to add people to that, all that stuff's free. So there's kind of no excuse, really.
So do you have any advice for somebody who's looking for a job right now and maybe he's finding it a little bit difficult?
Yes. Don't take it personally. I think it's a very, very difficult time to be looking for work. Especially when your job is pretty niche. In the hospitality sector, you tend to be judged on the brand that you've worked for, and so people are making kind of judgments beyond your own ability. They're making a judgment based on whether they think the brand that you have worked for represents them, and that's a hard pill to swallow, because actually they should be talking about whether your behaviours fit and whether whether you're a fit for the organisation, but they can't see that from a CV. I would say to have a really structured approach to job hunting, so know exactly who you've applied to, when, who the hiring manager is, have a follow-up time of probably 5 to 7 days of just ideally their personal email, and they're not that difficult to find. Once you know the format of the email, just drop them an email, and it's quite difficult to do a follow-up email without a tinge of aggression. So it's a really tricky email to write, because you can't do that as per my last email, because suddenly you're like, oh god. It's got to be it's got to be really well thought out as that follow-up email, I think, and just maybe sense check it with a friend, but having that kind of structured approach, but then ruling a job out. So if you haven't heard back in X amount of time, get it off your list and have kind of mental closure on it, so you don't feel as though you've got all these open job processes in the abyss. Okay, if I've not heard back in 3 weeks, I'm not going to hear back. Close, go. I would approach, like, for senior positions, I would also consider approaching people where you don't see job adverts. So, for example, you might approach a people director for a brand that you really want to work at. They might just have a private confidential vacancy, or they might have something that you're not quite sure of. So a really well-crafted email. I think cover letters are probably a bit dated now, but a really well-crafted email, being clear about why you want to work there might up your chances as well. But mainly, I don't know how you gain this, but this kind of resilience of it's not you, that everybody is going through that, and it does probably take, it could take 3 to 6 months to find the right thing, but also not being totally diehard on, is this the right thing? So people do a job for 3 months and it's not right, and that's fine. It's not, I know it's not ideal for anybody involved, but don't obsess over finding perfection. Would be my advice. Yeah, and speak to agencies. They've got a really good idea about what's going on, and they can offer comfort as to advice as to maybe why. We had a gentleman recently, for example. He was an owner of a business, and he was trying to get a job back as being employed, and it was really challenging, because people had presumed, because he'd had his own business, that he was kind of unemployable. So, he made some tweaks on his CV that wasn't as, his CV became less ownerish, and he suddenly started to get interviews. So there can be small things that might be either putting people off, a bias that's putting hiring managers off, that you might get advice from an agency that might help you.
And CVs are quite hard, aren't they? Because, especially if you're someone who communicates quite verbally, to then kind of put pen to paper and try and sell yourself, but not oversell yourself or undersell yourself. It's really difficult to get right.
I mean, I know we're not talking about CVs, but the CVs that look great are really simple. They talk about achievements. They have data on them. They're not stories. I did this, I did that. They are real key achievements that person was responsible for. And, people want to see kind of numbers as well as, kind of people-focused achievements. But data and data-led achievements, I say, is really important to a CV.
Excellent. Good tip.
Go. Heard it here first.
And so then I guess, let's flip it on its head. Hiring managers, how do we make sure that it's a kind of people-led or people-centered process that when you're looking at recruiting?
I mean, one really simple thing would to be have some kind of feedback process within the journey of people who aren't offered the job. We're doing exit interviews now as the norm, really. We're doing, in MPS suddenly kicks in when, EMPS, sorry, when you start with a role. But that bit of from when you see an advert or when you start engaging with a business to, being rejected throughout a process is a really key part to employer brand. And so one really simple thing would be to put some kind of feedback into that. That would be, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, and I guess kind of going back to something that you said earlier as well, that kind of being open and transparent about maybe timelines and kind of what the process looks like. Because I guess even if I think back on the times that I've been recruiting, I haven't included, how long it's potentially going to take, how many interviews there are going to be, a rough idea of timelines. I mean, no one's going to,
Yeah, and that helps you as well as the hiring manager, because if somebody's got another process going on and they get offered, but they have no idea about how long yours will take, then they kind of are forced into a corner of accepting that offer and will drop out of your process. But if they know, actually, I can say to this person who's offered me, I've got a final in a week's time or on this date, then we can manage everybody's expectations. And that does feel frustrating sometimes when there's an unknown, that it's really difficult for people to know what to do. And you kind of candidates can end up accepting offers, letting people down, choosing the wrong job just because it was the first offer. Because they don't know about timescales. That's a really good one.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. So if people want to know... I don't
think I've ever spoken about recruitment for so long. Is it?
Surely you have.
Somebody showed some interest in recruitment. Talk all day.
Well, so if people wanted to maybe know a little bit more about 68 People or kind of want to get in contact, give us your elevator pitch.
So we have an office in London and an office up in Manchester. There are 22 of us altogether, including a training division. We recruit internationally, and we would love to hear from people. We work in all different sectors, whether it's hotels, in QSR, in pubs, bars, restaurants, and we, like I say, we want to change the way the world views recruitment. So I'd love people to give us a try and see whether they have a good experience.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.